I really did want to come on for The Wiz. The Wiz is one of my favorite interpretations of the Wizard of Oz story. It is also a highly theatrical um, filming. It's actually made it onto Broadway. It's been a very big Broadway show for a good long while. NBC
Mm-hmm.
a few years back actually did a filming of the Broadway show, which I absolutely loved. It's got a fantastic soundtrack, and with my theatrical, specifically musical theater um, background, I just really felt that I could talk about this, and I I love this movie.
That's great. That'll be a
Well,
nice counterbalance to Jason, who
yes.
who can't wait to give it the Oz treatment, as near as I can tell.
No, well, I mean, yeah, I'll go ahead and preface this. Please don't hate me after we get done.
So I have a little bit of tenuous relationship with the Wizard of Oz. I grew up in Kansas, and it was absolutely fucking everywhere to the point where I'm really fucking sick of the Wizard of Oz unless it's a really strange retelling of it.
Oh,
Uh,
good.
yeah, it. I remember we watched that every single year at the end of the year until I was in like eighth grade.
Isn't it like a Thanksgiving staple?
I don't know about Thanksgiving, but
It
we
used to
did
Okay.
it
be.
every
Yeah.
single year.
Yeah, I just really quick, I'm going to let you keep going with your spiel because I hate, I don't want to interrupt you and I hate when other people do it. But Robert Winfrey, way back in the old timey times, did an Everyone Loves a Bad Guy on The Wizard of Oz, and I think specifically mentioned it was a Thanksgiving tradition that it would be aired on terrestrial television. Right, Jason? Yes or no?
Yeah, it was. I think TNT would always air it on Thanksgiving night.
Okay, back to you, Chae.
Um, but yeah, I don't know about Thanksgiving. Everyone I knew had cassette tapes of The
Mm-hmm.
Wizard of Oz that were so overplayed that there were parts of them that didn't work, and it just I I got to a point very early in my life where I was just really sick of it. Until I found some of these stranger, different interpretations of the story.
Mm-hmm.
And I really fell in love with I fell in love with the Wiz. Tin Man is actually one of my more preferred.
That was the sci-fi kind of action adventure show, wasn't it? Where
Yeah,
like there's like a revolution, it's like a communist style revolution going on in Oz, being led by the Tin Man, who's kind of like a general. Because I think I watched that.
yeah. So the Tin Man actually used to be a cop in that one,
Mm-hmm.
and he had basically gotten frozen
Mm-hmm.
until Dorothy's I, granddaughter, I think,
Right.
ended up getting splatted into the OZ.
Yes.
It was just it was very interesting, and it's been a little while since I've seen that version, so I'm
Mm-hmm.
not 100% sure if I loved it um because it was good, or if it was because I am platonically in love with Alan Cummings.
Fair enough. Let's get into what this actually is. Um, I grew. I think I've told you before, and Chae, I don't know if I've ever told you this, but the first 12 years of my life, I was like the only white kid in my school. I grew up in a predominantly black neighborhood, and I was immersed in the culture of my neighborhood. So things like The Wiz, which The Wiz came out. I'll go through the demographic information in just a second. It comes out in 1978. I'm 2 at the time. So playing The Wiz at school, on the times that they would play a movie for the class or play something in your chorus class or something like that was not uncommon, especially for the school that I went to. So I almost guarantee you the first time I ever saw The Wiz was in elementary school. I probably caught a viewing of it on TV, and then I haven't watched until I played it for my kids and my girlfriend. I have not watched this thing in decades. And boy, was the playing this for especially my son, who is turned into young Robert Winfrey. I'm like young Sheldon. It was over. He just got up and declared that it was a crime against cinema, and that these were Lovecraftian monsters, and I'd scarred him for life, and I told him to take a Xanax. So needless to say, this is quite the visual experience. So let's get into it. The Wiz is a 1978 American musical fantasy adventure film directed by Sidney Lumet, adapted from, as Chae said, the 1974 Broadway musical. It is a reimagining, obviously, of the Wizard of Oz novel by L. Frank Baum with an African-American cast. Dorothy is a 24-year-old teacher from Harlem. She is magically transported to the urban fantasy land of Oz, and on her travels, she seeks help from the mysterious Wiz, who is played by the late, great, amazing treasure of American cinema and culture, Richard Pryor. She befriends the Scarecrow, who is played by the late pop star Michael Jackson, a robot Tin Man, who is played by the ever hilarious Nipsey Russell, and the Cowardly Lion, who is played by Ted Ross. So there's not much derivation in terms of plot here. You know, Dorothy, the thing starts at, I think it's Thanksgiving, and 87 people show up to this one Harlem flat to have Thanksgiving dinner. And Dorothy, who's played by Diana Ross, who is supposed to be 24, she looks 54, and she is just over it. she's not into this at all, and neither is the dog. So Toto fucks off and runs into the snow, and Diana Ross follows him into the snow, and a magical snowy tornado shows up in Harlem, sure, and transports her to the land of Oz. Jonas's headcanon with that was she was actually frozen in the snow and dying of hypothermia this entire time, and this is all a hallucination, which I would absolutely buy. So anyway, she shows up in Munchkin Land. The Good Witch says, "You've killed the Wicked Witch of the East, and here's magic slippers. They are white, not ruby in this particular case." And she is sent hither and forth to Oz by following the yellow brick road, and everywhere is. And I really, when I'm done with the plot synopsis and I go to you, Chae, I just love for you to speak endlessly about the set design. But everywhere is urban blight, because apparently that is the authentic African-American experience of which this is based on. Just urban blight and garbage everywhere and broken streets and dreams. So she follows the yellow brick road. She meets Michael Jackson, who is being taunted by the crows from Dumbo. And he is stuck on a pole, and she gets him off of there, and they now become fast friends. They travel forth. They meet the Tin Woodsman. They do the oil can bit. So he follows them. They show up to what looks like museum steps, and there are cement lions there. And of course, our Cowardly Lion pops out of one, and he tries to scare him off, and it does not work. And eventually, they determine that he's the Cowardly Lion. They eventually get to Oz. They meet Richard Pryor, and Richard Pryor says, "Go kill the Wicked Witch of the West," who we have not met yet, and this is one of my major criticisms of this film, but we'll get there. He says, "Hey, there's a Wicked Witch of the West. You done killed the Wicked Witch of the East. Now go kill her sister. That'll make everything all right." So they do, and much like the Judy Garland movie, they use water to kill her. In this particular case, Scarecrow tells Dorothy, "Why don't you just turn the sprinkler system on?" Perfect. So they melt the witch. They go back to Oz. They determine that Richard Pryor's wizard is actually a halfway corrupted politician who flew to Oz in an air balloon, just like his predecessor. And the Wicked Witch of the East, or rather the Good Witch of the East, one more time, the Good Witch of the North shows up and says, "Hey, if you'd only believe in yourself, you could go home, and you've had the power all along, Dorothy." And she says, "Oh, alrighty." Then she starts to think of home, and she wakes up from her hypothermia and runs into the house, following Toto once again. And that is The Wiz. I have thoughts, but I want to go to you first, Chae. You wanted to be here. This is your moment. Hit it, girl. What did you think of this interpretation of The Wiz?
I loved it. It is a really simple story. It's a little bit of an odd story, but I think that fits in really well with the dreamscape that was kind of presented in the original film Wizard of Oz.
Mhm.
Like this is Dorothy. The entire time Dorothy thinks that this is a dream and none of this stuff is supposed to make sense, so she just kind of goes along with it. And I
Yeah, it's
think
like a
as far as,
Wonderland vibe, like an Alice in
yeah,
Wonderland
a
vibe.
little bit of a Wonderland vibe. And I think the plot line works really well for it. But I also don't think that the plot line is really the focus of this film. This is very much a Broadway show. This entire thing is about spectacle. It is about the music. It is about the dancing. It is about the singing. And on that point, it works really well. And it's honestly, one of the better it is one of the better interpretations from live theater to film. A lot of the time, production companies will have a little bit of a hard time transferring live theater into film.
Cats.
Yes, that is a perfect example of how not to do that. But there's a lot of stuff that does go into transferring a live theatrical production into a film. A lot of it is songs have to be cut out for time. There has to be a translation of the set pieces because a lot of the time in theater, where the set pieces are moving and what direction they're moving will actually be part of either the song or the theme, or will be a really big transitional piece in the show itself. And transferring that into a film where you don't have that very set stage with a static viewpoint 100% of the time is very difficult. And I think they did this really well because they actually did, NBC did a filming of the live show fairly recently. I think it was 4 or 5 years ago.
Mhm.
And they did a pretty decent job translating the transitions, all of the set pieces moving and stuff like that into film when they were doing this film. They also did a really fantastic job with the sets and the costumes for everyone. It is a very it's a very gritty, very community theater style of production that firmly sets itself in Fantasyland. A lot of the costumes look like they were literal trash that was picked up and thrown onto these characters that were from this Fantasyland. And it's all very cohesive. The set design is it's a very bright and colorful, very vaudevillian and almost German expressionist style with towering buildings and at the same time very claustrophobic at times looking sets, and everything looks cobbled together. It's honestly it's kind of steampunk before steampunk, especially with the
I would
Wicked
100%
Witches
agree with that.
sweatshop.
This definitely feels like I struggle with the idea that this is the authentic Black experience, and going, oh, it's urban. It definitely felt more steampunk than anything else.
Yeah, and I don't have any idea of how close it is to an authentic Black experience, but it's definitely a very different type of experience than what someone like I would come up with having grown up in Kansas.
Sure.
Because my idea of Wizard of Oz, or my original idea of Wizard of Oz, was big, sprawling, sets that have almost nothing in it, a few clumps of trees over here, and valleys and flat land, because that's what
Yeah, let's
Kansas
say
is.
amber
There's
waves of
almost
grain.
nothing in Kansas.
Isn't that all of Kansas? Amber waves of grain and Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah. Yep. There's
Okay.
not a lot in Kansas. If you drive through Kansas, it is wheat fields everywhere. Oh, there's a small clump of trees. Wheat fields everywhere.
Okay.
But I really did like this very different interpretation
Mhm.
of the roads and of the sets, and just how different and how compact it was, and even the changes to who the Wicked Witch and the Wizard were. I thought they were really good, very different interpretations from what I had originally seen.
Okay. Me cut in here, and then I'll go to you, Jason. The thing that has always stuck with me about this, the thing that I remembered was "Ease on Down the Road." It is easily the most standout, best song in this entire piece. To the point that without even thinking necessarily about the whiz, I will, when I need people to move fast, or I'm addressing walking of any kind, I like, let's go ease on down the road. It has been said that in the readings that I've done that the most standout performer in this and the best performance is Michael Jackson, and I would heartily agree with that. Michael Jackson kind of runs away with this, which is weird because he's not clearly playing a bombastic character. He's playing a very kind of shy, almost mumbly at times character, but Michael Jackson, first of all, has charisma for days, or had charisma for days, especially back then. This is the off the wall Thriller era. Those are two different albums, people. Know your history. And back then, he really did, like, he had a charisma that was hard to put a finger on, and it comes through here in his performance. And I honestly would have rather watched him than anybody else in the movie. That said, I struggled with watching it because I was really watching it with a critical eye, and I don't necessarily want to like just tear it to pieces because there's some good things about it and there's some not good things about it. Here are the not good things. Film is not the stage. The stage is not film. The stage is naturally dark. Theaters are dark. And you have to light things a certain way, but you cannot get away. The creeping darkness of theater is ever omnipresent. And film, you don't have to deal with that. You can have it as dark or as light as you want. You can change the entire world. You can make it look like James Cameron's or Avatar, where everything is blue. You can do all kinds of shit. And here, I understand. If you compare it to Wicked, just to do an apples to apples comparison ish, Wicked is a film. It's a musical film, but it's a film. Those are well lit sets. The production design is definitely Oscar worthy. It is bright. It is colorful. It is otherworldly. It really takes you there. Here, because everything is so goddamn dark. Like when she gets to Munchkin Land, by comparison to when Judy Garland gets to Munchkin Land and they do the transition from, Game Boy sepia tone to, color, it has the effect of transporting the audience as it should. That's what was in its intent. And Munchkin Land, while on practical sets and everything else, if you've ever seen any like the behind the scenes stuff from The Wizard of Oz, is so goddamn bright and colorful. And here, I laughed my ass off when she shows up in Munchkin Land because the first thing she does is hits a neon sign like goddamn Superman in Oz, Superman in Zod from Superman 2, hitting the Pepsi sign. I was like, what the fuck? Like, why that choice? And then everything in like Munchkin Land is so goddamn dark. And then it kind of just stays that way through most of the film. As if to say, like, we just want you to never forget this was a stage musical. Like, we got it. We're good. Like, I don't need oppressive darkness in this movie. Diana Ross looks like they never yelled cut to her, and she didn't sleep through the entire filming of this thing. She looks tired. Diana Ross is a pretty woman and very talented, and here she looked like she was a goddamn hostage. Not to mention the fact that every time, like, I remember thinking to myself, like, I remembered the song "Ease on Down the Road." I never remembered the dance movement. And watching it at almost 50 years old, I'm looking at Diana Ross and like, was her direction you walk like Kermit the Frog? She's doing like this shit. like what is she, a bushwhacker from the WWF days? What the hell are you doing, Diana Ross? That woman has no bones, Jason. None. She has no skeleton at all. She is all rubber. And she was doing "Ease on Down the Road." And every time they like went to her and she was doing, she was kind of like marching, dancing. She just looked ridiculous.
She looked like Gumby.
Yeah, she looked like she was made of rubber. Um, and for whatever reason, and Chae, I don't know if you have an opinion on this at all. The fucking dress they put her in. Like, I don't know why they consciously put her in what appeared to be a rag, like just the drabbest dress ever. But that's choice. And again, if you're trying to say something about black people in this country, and it's supposed to be interpreted in all facets of this movie, I guess that's a choice too. But again, I looked at that and I went, why would you do this? Why it almost looked like they sandbagged Diana Ross in the production of this versus everybody else.
So I think that dress was also supposed to be a lot more of a contrast between between who Dorothy was and what was going on in the Land of Oz.
Sure.
Because it did look a lot more like it was a very comfortable, very practical dress.
Yeah.
That she would have been wearing like while she was getting ready for the party before she put her actual party clothes on. And I think it was really supposed to contrast with how like big and gaudy, like especially how big and gaudy the witch's outfit was.
Oh my god!
Oh my god, I fucking love the witch's
what
outfit.
What an amazing costume that is! That dress she's wearing.
Oh yeah, it is. It is fantastic. That is like Ursula levels of drag baubles.
It was awesome. That'll be the last thing I say on this because I don't want to be on this forever. And I want Jason to have his piece when we move on to Purple Rain. But if you go back to the way the MGM Judy Garland film is structured, the Wicked Witch shows up in Munchkinland and presents herself as a threat. When they meet the Scarecrow, she's back again. When they meet the Tin Woodsman, she's back again. She shows up not during the bit with the Cowardly Lion, but shortly after they're in the poppy field, and that is one of her obstacles she throws at them. So by the time they get to the wizard, and the wizard's like, "I need you to kill her. Just kill her dead. Bring her back the broom, and then I'll send you. Then I'll give everybody what they want, like Santa Claus, and send you home." You are, as an audience member, understanding what kind of threat this woman is and why the wizard would want her dead. You don't get introduced to the witch until they show up at her sweatshop, which I think is hilarious, by the way. And they do a song and a dance number where you, as an audience member, associate her with being evil because she's running a sweatshop. Not because of anything else happening in this movie, but because sweatshops are bad. Again, an odd interpretation in this movie. And then they get there and she's doing evil stuff and they deal with it. And and again, the Scarecrow says, "Turn on the sprinkler system, see what happens." And they melt her. But I was like,
yeah, and I do think that some of that was stuff that was actually cut from the musical for time. Because I do remember a little bit more about the Wicked Witch from the musical before they get to the sweatshop.
Yeah, maybe get to Oz faster then and cut that instead of what they did with the witch.
Yeah, like I think she swoops in and does a couple of really shitty things during the musical and like fucks with the Scarecrow and the lion a little bit more than she does in the movie.
Which is what was needed here. So that was it. I mean, it's not that I don't like The Wiz. I'm not quite where my son is, where I think this is an abomination. There are some very dated things about it. There were some very hilariously interesting choices. And again, I was reading the Wikipedia page on this, and there was a lot of like allusions to, well, this speaks to the Black experience because these are interpretations that deal with slavery. And I'm like, they're the exact same thing that happened in the Judy Garland version, but those aren't associated with slavery. So I think there's weird projection going on in the interpretations of it. But like overall, I think it's adorable. Weird, adorable, kind of a time capsule of its time. Jason, what did you think of The Wiz?
As a poor black man from the hills of West Virginia,
I
thought I did like it. There was some, like you said, there were some aspects I did like. I mean, like the Michael Jackson performance was great, even though that he was almost not in the movie, because Diana Ross said, "If I'm not in the movie, you're not going to have Michael Jackson." And Berry Gordy was like, "Okay, we'll appease you," because they was together at the time. To appease you, that I will give you the role of Dorothy if you can helped secure Michael Jackson for the role of Scarecrow, which is really interesting in how deals were done then. But I really feel that this is a very bright light on the reason why some musicals should not be turned into film. Um, because I think they tried to go overboard with a lot of the interpretations, and sometimes less is more. And in this case, I think that they try to do too much grandeur and try to make it too over the top. I think that if they would have kept it like simple and the stage show, which I actually like plays, a little known fact. But I actually like going to a theater and watching a play because of the intimacy, you do see like the set pieces moving and everything, the transitions. And I really think that they not only took me out of it for the over the top, trying to be something that was more visually appeasing than. I totally missed that. But I
Don't
think
worry
that
about it.
it took me out of it there, and I feel
Mhm.
like when we studied this in film class, it was from the scope of this is a black exploitation of the Wizard of Oz,
Mhm.
uh, and my film professor was like, this is basically them trying to take a classic movie and fit it into a narrative that plays to a niche audience.
Right.
Um, and that's where we studied it from
Can I
because you
let me throw
you
a
do have
contrast at you, Jason? You and I talked
no.
about okay. You and I talked about Blackula and how
That was a great
Blackula at
movie.
first, yeah, well, that's my point. Blackula at first blush seems like okay, you've taken the classic Dracula story and just blacked it up, and like that wasn't our experience with Blackula. There were some stuff. Some of it was a little bit like that, but for the most part, it was just another interpretation of Dracula, and it didn't necessarily rest on the racial components, unlike this seems to.
Yeah, I think with the difference with Blackula is Blackula didn't take itself too seriously. This tried to take itself way too serious
Okay.
and try to force home that it could be um, the plight of the black man. Which I mean, it's fine and that's all fine and good, but you could have done. There was a lot of choices made here that could have went a different direction. If you went a different direction, it would have worked out a little bit better. Most notably, all of the scarecrows were certainly a choice. Um,
I was
they,
really waiting for one of them to go. I see the house fly.
yeah, I mean, I think some of the South called and got the crows back um, after this movie. I think that that's where they actually got the narrative for how the crows should act. I was waiting for somebody to break out into zippity doo dah.
And walks Uncle Remus for no apparent reason.
Yeah, Uncle Remus. As we'll throw this back to our famous thing, Uncle Remus come across and just says message, and
Welcome to Black History Month on the Radulich and Broadcasting
yeah,
Network, Chae.
where everything always ties back to uh, Keenan Ivory Wayans and "Don't Be a Menace to Society While Drinking Your Juice in the Hood."
Yeah, she's never seen it.
Yeah, I highly recommend. Um, where he just shows up and says message anytime if something important
Yeah.
comes on screen. But yeah, I mean, I think the characters themselves, I don't think that it was bad. I think the Diana Ross choice was a swing and a miss. I think they could have got somebody. I think she let her star power kind of shoehorn her into this movie.
I don't know if the timing would have worked out because I don't remember when Whitney Houston became a thing. But imagine Whitney Houston in The Wiz.
Oh
at
yeah,
that time.